Welcome to Eden Live, where I am reading all of Eden by FREI live on Facebook and on YouTube with the recorded clips, as you may know, making their way ultimately onto Instagram, IG, TV. Now, a couple of episodes ago, I promised I would share with you some exciting news. Now, exciting is a relative term, of course, relative primarily to the person talking about or affected by it. And so whether you find this anywhere near as exciting as I not only don't know, but I dare to doubt, but still I will tell you about it now because it is a little bit exciting for me. And thank you for joining me and for allowing me to share with you this source of excitement. Because a few years ago, I wrote a story for a book on commission, on request. I was asked whether I could write a story that would form the core of an anthology of existing texts, and this was going to be the only purpose-written story in it. And the big book that came out in 2005, published by Birkhäuser, was A Quantum City. Here it is. This is what it was, and this is what it still is. It's still available. It's a wonderful book. It's a fabulous anthology compiled by two excellent people, Diana Alvarez-Murran and Mira Roman, and edited by no less excellent people, Rutger Hoverstadt and Vera Buhlmann. And it gives you as good a snapshot of how we are today as a society of societies and as a civilization, a Western civilization, as you could wish for. But I always felt, even right at the beginning when this came out, and I'm immensely proud of this book, by the way, I just love it, wouldn't it be nice if the story that I had written for it, that is published in this book, were also available separately as a self-contained little story, because after all, just a fictional narrative. And this has now happened. I have now done this. I have released, it has been published, I have released Orlando in the City, as it is called, the story, as a paperback. You can see it here behind me, just there, and it's also here. That's what it is. Orlando in the City, here it is as a paperback. It's a fairly simple premise. The task that I was given as a writer was, could I write a story that takes place in different cities in different literary styles? And I then developed this idea and decided to create an homage to Orlando, the character invented and created originally by Virginia Woolf, and not use the existing story, that would be pure plagiarism, but instead create a new story and expand the Orlando imagination to 2,500 years, from ancient Greece to the end of the 20th century. And thus came about Orlando in the Cities, the story of a beautiful but lazy shepherd boy on Crete, who is tasked by the gods to settle a dispute, to find out who among them is patron to the perfect city. And this journey takes him on a literary odyssey through 2,500 years. I would say, I'm calling it a playful literary odyssey through 2,500 years of Western civilization. And it's called Orlando in the Cities. It starts in Alexandria, where Orlando is a student of Euclid. Then he goes to Florence, where he meets Leonardo da Vinci, among others, and sits for a portrait. Then he goes to London, where he becomes a favorite of the Queen and falls in love with a Russian princess. This may sound a little bit familiar. Then turned woman, she then goes to Paris where she happens to join the Women's March on Versailles, and has a very interesting and complex relationship with Robespierre. And then, still a woman, but now dressed as a man, because she finds it more convenient to do so. In 1905, she finds herself in Vienna, where she meets a very curious Dr. Freud and a very young Ludwig Wittgenstein and one or two other people who happen to be in Vienna right at the time. And then finally, in 1964 in New York, back-turned man again, but now experimenting with drag, Orlando joins the circle around Andy Warhol's factory and experiences a little bit of what that's like, until Orlando just becomes Orlando, without gender or agenda. That's the story of Orlando in the cities in a nutshell. And if you want it, then you can now have it because it's available as a book, in paperback, ebook, and also as a Kindle. Just Google it or use whatever is your favorite search engine or go to the links. You know how to find these things. That is the news. And if you are wondering, coincidentally, how it is that I'm wearing an ever so slightly festive shirt, that is indeed the reason. There is, of course, no launch party. We can't have parties or events or anything at the moment. So this is just a soft launch. It's just available as of now, as of yesterday. But I am celebrating because I love this story. And you might think, well, of course you love it, but you wrote it. But that's not quite how it works. Sometimes you write something and you think, well, that was interesting, or that was good, or that was an interesting experience, but I'm not quite sure whether it will work or whether other people will like it. But this I love. This is one of the things I absolutely love doing at the time, and I'm very, very happy to share with you now. And that's also why today, quite exceptionally, I have poured myself a glass of rosé, because that seems to be quite appropriate. Not champagne, but not partying, but something to celebrate. So cheers to storytelling. And in the interest of storytelling, let us continue with the tape. Which is volume 6 of Eden, the Eden miniature series from Eden by FREI. And in the tape, we are now bang in the middle, where we move on this journey, on this actual journey that I went on towards Italy. That's the name of the chapter, towards Italy. Tuesday, I travel on, taking an early morning train that departs at 7:21 towards Italy. The journey, the tape tells me, is fairly pleasant, with the exception of one incident. This sits ingrained on my brain, and whilst most of the other experiences of that August are a haze with only the occasional moment or image in any kind of focus, this one is sharp and clear, and it still makes me squirm to this day. I was tired. I had slept for 2 hours again. Monday night, we decided to go to the cinema. Anne and some of her friends had gone to see some American movie I evidently did not rate or care about, and I had gone to see Le Grand Bleu, one of the most stunningly beautiful films I've ever seen. I now hear myself rave, and I remember that vividly too, though not only from this screening, but from another, much more thrilling one later in Paris. Jean-Marc Barr. He is fantastic. He's certainly a name to remember. After the cinema, a crepe, and then to bed really late. So, with very little sleep, I'm on a train that is completely full, though I do have a seat by the window near the end of the carriage. I mostly daydream and possibly doze off a bit now and then, and everything is going fine until the train stops at the spot where there seems to be nothing at all. It's not a town. It's not a village. It's barely a hamlet. There's a platform and a small building, and there are some signs that to me in my state, which is not comatose but not alert either, are meaningless. On board come 2 customs officers. I see them appear at the other end of the carriage, quite far away from where I am, and as I look up at them, I semi-consciously give a sigh of profoundest ennui. Just exactly at the moment that one of them catches my eye. I think nothing more of this for the next 5 minutes or so, and continue gazing out of the window, thinking my nondescript thoughts. My sigh and my facial expression had lasted for maybe a second. But I do remember distinctly allowing that gut response to just come out, an aversion to officialdom, almost, but almost not quite, wanting to show them I held them in a sizable degree of post-juvenile contempt, not as human beings, of course, but as uniforms holding up the train's so effortless glide through the artificially delineate countryside. The two officials make their way through the carriage, checking passports, not hassling anyone. They work quite fast, and I'm almost beginning to like them for being so efficient and quick about their monotonous task. Then they get to me. I am sitting by my window, resting my head on my hand, and look up at them, extremely tired and bored. I am wearing all black. I am 24, with peroxide dyed hair. I had reacted to spotting them from a distance with a look on my face and body language that to them must have signalled not so much ennui as trouble. I am their prime suspect, certainly of the carriage, probably of the train, possibly of the day, maybe the month. Granted, it could have been worse. They could have taken me off the train and subjected me to a strip search. They didn't. They went through everything I had on me. They opened my luggage, I seem to recall this being a big hold-all bag, searched through my clothes, opened my toiletry bag. They found a tiny tube of something and demanded to know what it was. It was a cream for mosquito bites. They thought that hard to believe, which was ridiculous, because it was clearly labelled, smelt like medicine, and we were on a board to Italy in the summer. My brain was not willing to argue. My Italian register brought forth zanzare. It took about 20 minutes. It felt like 2 hours. It was not even humiliating so much as it was unnecessary and, I felt, vindictive. This, I now know, is what profiling feels like if you match the profile. This is what being exposed to low-level authority feels like if it turns against you. Today I understand people who complain about stop and search policies, or who are tired of being the ones picked out at airport entry points because of their skin tone or what they are wearing. It was, by comparison, harmless, and yet I wanted it just to end. I felt exposed and hard done by. And I was. Still, I had never in my life purchased or carried any illegal substance, and so I had nothing on me, and they did not find anything. They left, we departed. I arrived in Milan, where I did something really stupid. I got off the train and went into the station to look at the board where all the trains were displayed. Vicenza, this told me, would next be up at 2 p.m. It was now getting towards 1:30, but for some to me now unfathomable reason, not trusting that intelligence, I decided to go to the information desk to make sure. There was only one window open, money exchange and information. After queuing for half an hour, I arrived at said window only to find that this was the wrong one. Nonetheless, they asked me what I wanted to know, and I told them I wanted to know when the next train would leave for Vicenza. At 2 p.m, they said, glancing idly at a timetable. I ran, as best I could with my bag, to the platform where I saw the train pull out of the station. What, I wonder, was that all about? Sometimes I just did not trust myself at all. I phoned my friend Stefano in Vicenza from a public phone box, which cost me 600 lire, I recalled, to tell me I'd be arriving 1 hour later. Stefano, once I'd got there and had settled, took me to the beautiful piazza in the town centre, where we also met up with our mutual friend, Giovanni. Thus begins about a week in Vicenza, and at the hands of Stefano's mum, I tell the tape, I'm being fed to the point of bursting. I spend one day in Venice, mostly at the Peggy Guggenheim collection, and passing one of the many small shops, I see a leather jacket I particularly like the look of. I go inside and casually ask the shop assistants how much it costs, there being no price tag. 5 million lire, she tells me, which at the time is about £2,000. I see, I say, as matter of factly, or so I think, as I can, and I do this unnecessary thing of looking at it in a little more detail to signal that I'm really not perturbed at all by the price. I'm really perturbed by the price. Then I do that even more unnecessary thing of looking around the shop a bit further before I leave, just to make sure the middle-aged woman, whom I will never meet again in my life, and who has long since sussed I'm in the wrong shop, understands that the prices here are really no big deal for me at all. They're a really big deal for me. Vicenza, I tell myself of the future, is incredibly quiet, but I like the Teatro Olimpico, calling it stunning. Built like a Greek arena, but all indoors, I describe it as absolutely beautiful and venture that it may be the only one of its kind in Italy, though where I get that from or whether it is true, I don't know. At one point, we go to a party together, which I confide to the tape, reminds me of the time when I and my Spaniels from the Gymnasium Münchenstein had our parties. The ease, the freedom. I feel charmed, I put on record, and delighted by the friendliness of these people. I also go back to Venice on various occasions. There can't have been many, considering how long I was in Vicenza for. And on one of these, get to see a Pierpaolo Pasolini film at the festival, apparently as a matter of extreme luck. How I managed to get there on time, I will never know, but it worked, and it worked to the minute. I seem to have walked into the post office, presumably having got to the Lido first, and asked where the auditorium was that I needed to get to, only to find that it just so happened to be that particular building where the film was about to start. What exactly the film was, I don't put on record. There are two more moments that stick in my memory from Vicenza, and although I don't talk about them on the tape, I am as certain as I can be that they belong to that same trip. I've since been back to Vicenza a number of times, and there was most likely at least one more visit within the next year or two. But the way things fit together, especially with the amount of time I seem to have on my own while staying with Stefano and his family, who are presumably out working, makes me think that this is all one occasion. The first one involved me attempting to make coffee with one of these typical two-part Italian jugs. I took the thing, which I myself had just used and which was still hot, off the hob and, wearing oven gloves, unscrewed the top from the bottom. At that point, there was an almighty bang, and ground coffee splattered all over the immaculately clean small-town kitchen, covering every available surface in fine specks of wet brown sediment. Stefano was grace personified and just helped me clean up before his mum got back home. The other one takes place in Vicenza town. I go up to a small church that is either closed or about to close, and there's a young, good-looking guard at the gate. This makes me think it might have been a small museum or some other historic site, since churches didn't usually have guards, as far as I can remember. He wears a uniform of the nondescript charcoal or dark grey variety, and to my surprise, he opens the door for me and shows me around. We get to the end of a short tour at the lowest part of the building, a crypt or a vault, of which I do not recall what it contained. And there is this moment that stays in my mind. This moment when something is meant to happen and nothing happens. I wasn't sure then what it was that was meant to happen, and I'm not even entirely sure now. Looking back, I wonder, was he about to make a move on me? If so, why didn't he? I was then, I now see, quite attractive. I didn't think so then. We were alone. He had keys to the building. He had, most probably, locked the front door. I liked him. I think I would have wanted him to make a move. I certainly wouldn't have made a move first, though. I was in foreign territory. I was far too shy and too gauche, and also nowhere near conceited enough. I never assumed people fancied me so much as to want to make a move on me, sometimes until long after they did. Maybe I was too aloof, too. With hindsight, maybe I understand why he might not have made a move, even if he had wanted to, and had felt that I possibly wanted him to. And the conditions were well-nigh perfect for, well, at least a kiss, just to see what that would feel and where it would lead. Just to see how that would feel and where it would lead. I had a barrier up then, practically always. I was not just aloof, but also distant, remote. What a pity. The moment lasted, not very long, until it was over, and he led me back upstairs into the Italian sunshine. I thanked him, I said goodbye, and I wondered, what was that? Did I miss something here? This feeling, this question, did I just miss something here that was happening, or should have been happening, or could have been happening if only I'd been alert to it? Perhaps less naive, perhaps less insecure, perhaps more attuned. It followed me for years, for decades even, until recently. Doesn't do so much anymore. I miss things occasionally still, but not quite so much as a rule. And I make mistakes, of course. Who doesn't? And sometimes I'm just not brave enough. In fact, I think, am probably just not quite brave enough. And then, on the way onwards in Milan, I actually went to some nondescript building in the outskirts of somewhere and tried to talk to somebody from the Italian TV network Rete Italia. What on earth about? I have no idea. That is it for today. This was a slightly longer than average session, so on the Instagram channel it will be split into two because Instagram only allows for videos or clips up to 15 minutes, and this is coming up to half an hour. So not really with any apologies, because it's there, you can watch it or you can simply not watch it. I offer it up for your delectation. I thank you for spending time with me. I hope you will do so again. I commend this to you, Orlando in the Cities, which has nothing to do with the Eden Miniature series, except that I also wrote it, and I hope you're able to stay safe and healthy and sane, and hope to see you again very soon. Until then, love and let love, and